There's an old story told about the Rabbi. He was once asked by someone struggling with their faith, "How do I find God?" The Rabbi turns to him and says, "We find God wherever we let God in." My question on this Yom Kippur morning is, what happens when we go to open that door or that window so that we can let God in, and it's closed? We push harder, but it does not budge. We push and try, and it's just stuck. What do we do then? So sorry. I'm so sorry. Hi. I'm a little busy right now, but please take care. Talk to you soon. 6 months ago, I was sitting in my virtual Zoom class as part of the Hartman Institute. The topic this semester was theology. The instructor asked us to go to a breakout room and share our earliest memory of God. When it was my turn, I opened my mouth and out came silence. Has that ever happened to you? You had faith, or you thought you had faith. But when you tried to explain God to a friend, a colleague, or children, the words weren't there, like someone stole the file. What do we do then? There is a story told in the Talmud of how Rabbi Akiva was on a boat in a stormy sea. The waves and the wind were so strong, they broke his boat. Rabbi Akiva makes it to the shore and is greeted by his students. "Rabbi Akiva," they asked, "how did you survive?" He tells them about the storm and adds, "When my boat shattered, I found a plank of wood and held on tight, and it took me over wave after wave until I found my way to the shore." It can be frightening when our boats crack or break in response to the storms of life. Yet Rabbi Akiva reminds us that one small plank of wood is all we need to stay afloat if our boat should ever upend. Life can be stormy, especially this past year. Over this past year, COVID rates went up and down. We overcame one type of COVID, and then we confronted with the Delta version. It was hard to find a vaccine, and then it became easy, and then we had to wait for others to take it. We wear masks, we take them off, we put them on again. Our children go to school, then school is closed, and we have to find plans for coverage, and then school reopens again. And the economy, recession awaited us, and then it got better for some and not for others. Should I be grateful? Do I need to still be worried? Like Rabbi Akiva, we are all travelers on the boat in the wavy sea. We have moments where we go up, feel the plateau, and then we plunge down to the depths. I guess by the time I reached the moment I was asked about my faith in that Zoom class, my boat had been so beaten down by the winds and the rain, I'd lost it, and I was alone at sea. What do we do at these moments? We look to find one small plank of wood. Let us take a moment and look for our planks of wood. I invite each of you to search for them on the shores of the river of your lives. What has washed up? I remember the faith of my Grandma Geet. She was a true aid or witness of God who would host our family at her home every Friday night. I remember how she would light the candles and how she would light one candle for every family member she had lost. I remember how she came to shul every Saturday morning, and I remember how I loved going to shul just to sit next to her. She was so happy at shul. I held on to her then, and I hold on to her now. I love you. Dr. Mara Benjamin, a teacher of mine at the Hartman Institute, highlighted to me that when we talk about faith, we have to resist seeing ourselves as being processed but rather always in process. I invite you to see your boat as being filled with boards from a life that is constantly growing and evolving. The second board I found was when I became a teenager. I remember the pressure to fit in, to be cool. I remember fighting and finding the freedom, or rather the attention, that I craved as the youngest member of my household. And I remember at the same time feeling shame, isolated, and unworthy. I'm so embarrassed, and I need you more than ever. You don't have to say anything. Just know, every night, moving forward, I will say the Shema to show you and to show myself that you are in my life. And I will say every single one of the Ten Commandments to show that I hear you. And I'm committed to making this world better. And I'm also committed to making myself better. Have you ever felt shame, alone, lost as a result of a choice you made? I don't know if it worked for you, but it did for me. Let us try it now with the recitation of the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. I've come across another board. Many years later, I'd fallen in love with this new woman from Anaheim. I was on my way to graduating from rabbinical school when all of a sudden I was filled with anxiety for the future. Could I afford this relationship? Where would I live? What type of parent could I be? Could I even be a parent? I remember you. Do you remember when in the middle of a rainy California December, I got in the car by myself and I drove from Los Angeles to the Redwoods? I remember gripping the steering wheel tight as the winds pushed the car and the rains blasted my windshield, and I drove up the windy roads of the one. And then when I reached the Avenue of the Giants, something prompted me to stop, park, and get out of the car and walk down a dirt path. I recall stopping and looking up, and because of the dust on the path, the full ray of the sun's light pierced through the forest canopy, and it temporarily blinded me. I looked down, and I saw a deer looking at me. Martin Buber shared that too often we look at others as tools who can serve our needs. Our work is to see people beyond the utility they provide. This is the origin of an I-thou relationship. It is how we come not just to know each other, but every creation in this world. And it is an entryway to see you. I wanted nothing from this deer. I was just captured by its innocent beauty, and I felt grateful to be in its presence. As its nostrils released a gentle exhale in the crisp forest air, I recall seeing everything so clearly. Hold on to Liz. Continue to be kind. Be good. Do my best. I was going to become a rabbi, and it was going to be okay. A moment that was probably 10 seconds long seemed eternal. I drove home with a sense of ease that I still carry with me. Thank you. In our Haftarah portion that we just read this morning, the prophet Isaiah reminds us that amidst the Yam Nigrash, the troubled sea, God calls out to us, Shalom, Shalom. Perhaps the more we search for these moments of our lives, the more we can hear the calming voice saying, Shalom, Shalom. Where is our phone? I'm sure all of us know where one of our phones are, but I'm not referring to the one that replies to, Hey Siri. Where is our other phone? The one that has a kol damama, a soft, silent voice that whispers like butterfly sneezes, one that slows our blood pressure, reminds us to breathe slowly and mindfully, and invokes a feeling that we are each so small but so necessary. Or maybe the question is, what number do we call? The good news is our tradition gives us a nice phone book. It's called the Siddur. In rabbinical school, I learned that our Siddur is filled with many names of God. Each name highlights a relationship that we are in need of. For those looking for a parent, God can be Avinu, or Father. For those looking for mercy, God is El Rachamim, the God who carries us in God's womb. And for those looking for order, God is Melech HaOlam, the sovereign of the world. Like the countless numbers in the yellow pages of old, the same is true with the names of God in the Siddur. The challenge is, with all of these names, how do we find the one that speaks to us? The work we have to do is to discover what do we need of God at the stage in our lives we are in, and then we will find the right name to call. On these high holidays, I ask the same question God asked of Adam, to Eve, to Abraham, and to so many of our ancestors, to you. Ayeka, where are we? From what place do each of us seek God? In the book Jew versus Jew, there is a beautiful story that describes an independent prayer community in LA known as the Library Minyan. They were discussing whether or not to add the imahot, the matriarchs, which we include in our prayer book. In the spirit of learning and making an educated decision, different leaders of the minyan were invited to speak as opponents or proponents. The group in the end was torn 50-50 until one of its most traditional voices, Joel Grossman, spoke. He was in favor. Why? He shared with the group that as a spouse in a relationship that struggled with infertility, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob did not speak to him. They were empty names. But the God of Sarah, who gave birth at 90, of Rebekah, who struggled in pregnancy, of Leah, who wished she was noticed by her husband, and the God of Rachel, who begged God to remove her barrenness, this God spoke to him. What number do we dial? Ayeka. Which God do we long for? What number do I dial? I dial the creator of punctured barrels. I don't want to talk. I don't want to talk. Oh, yes. I forgot to mention one reason my window is closed, why I had nothing to say when asked about God. It has not just been a turbulent year, but I must admit to you on this Yom Kippur morning, I am very angry with God. Anger is the emotional response to acts of injustice, and this was brought front and center to me when I buried a child. There are some things they do not prepare you for in rabbinical school. I said, I'm not talking. Leave me alone. We had a deal. Voltaire once said, when God and I pass each other on the way, we wave, but we do not speak. It is so hard to find the words. There is also a Hasidic teaching that says, sometimes I just offer up the letters, and my prayer is that God can arrange the words. Well, here goes. Shema koleni, hear me. When I applied to rabbinical school, I was asked to share my theology. It was difficult to articulate until I found a midrash that reminded me of who I was and then brought to my awareness a new part of myself I previously had not embraced. The midrash began by describing how we can find God through the acts of following tradition. And this was not new to me. In the same midrash, it spoke about when tradition does not speak to us, we can pursue new paths to find God. And so far, the midrash highlighted why I wanted to be a rabbi as I embraced the challenge of living a life of both tradition and change. As true as this was to me, it did not reveal anything new about my faith until I read the last part of the Midrash. A king ordered his people to fill punctured barrels with water. One of them was a fool. "What good is this?" he asked. The wise laborer turned to him and says, "Surely I will be paid for every barrel I fill, regardless if it leaks, for I am ultimately paid for my obedience to the king." Upon reading these words, I have to admit, I discovered that this has always been a part of me. I was called to be obedient to your word. I acknowledge that even at times I do not understand, I would still value the reward of adhering to a king, a sovereign that ensures there was order in the chaos. But after bearing this child, that part of me died. Could I, in the words of Rabbi Abraham Heschel, worship a king who rules in absurdity? Or in the words of Abraham, our patriarch, shall not the judge of the earth do justice? Hashofet kol haaretz lo ya'aseh mishpat. Long before the earth was placed on his casket, my faith in you died when I would visit him as he struggled with his cancer. And what killed me was watching this little boy sing your songs of Shabbat with joy despite his predicament. I thought of you when I heard Sean Cole, a journalist and producer, speak about losing his father when he says, "Losing a parent is like they keep dying in pieces as time wears on. The moment of their demise drifts farther and farther away from you, like a raft heading for the horizon." This was my predicament just a few months ago. I was now afloat in the water, watching my planks and memories of God float away. This is the fate that awaits us when we let go of God. How could you do this in a time of instability? You were my rock. You were my Tzur Yisrael. And I would fill broken caskets with water if it meant I knew someone was still in control. And now, after thinking about it for some time, I've come to see the true meaning of this midrash. It was not a story about blind faith. Rather, it was a story of the nature of our world. The world is a broken vessel, and you ask of us human beings to repair it. And the catch is, the tools we have are broken too. And we have to decide, despite the challenges, do we try to repair or do we just give up? God, look at your creations. See that even though we use barrels with holes to remove the floods in this world, we are still trying. We daven with masks on. We fight cancer with the science we have. And filled with fear, anxiety, and anger with you, we show up for the parents who have lost a child. Anu amecha ve'ata Eloheinu. We are your people, and you are our God. Anu pe'ulatecha ve'ata yotzreinu. We are the workers, and you are the one who created us with a caring heart and a will to repair our world. Anu segulatecha. We, humanity, are chosen, and all we ask of you is to be kerovenu, close to us. I hope each of us will find our plank. I hope we will find the right number to call. And I hope we will find a way through our anger when we are confronted with a lack of justice in our world. But why? Why is it important for us to open the window? Recently, This American Life podcast featured a recording of a phone call between a man in California and a man named Ajmal, standing in a canal outside the airport in Kabul, Afghanistan. The man speaking in California is Kirk Johnson, who has been trying to get people in Iraq and Afghanistan who have worked with the U.S. government and who are in danger, and he's trying to get them out of those countries. Ajmal struggles with anxiety, and while Kirk persists, Ajmal wants to turn back, yet Kirk stays with him. While being a world away, yet also in his ear, over the phone, Kirk gives Ajmal guidance on how to navigate the crowds, reminds him to hold his ground, and how to yell out, "I'm a Canadian citizen," to the Canadian Guard. Eventually, the Guard hears him and lets him in. Just when Kirk thinks Ajmal is safe, Ajmal says, "But what about my family?" Ajmal had left his family on the other side of the crowds. With the horde of people, it seemed an impossible mission for him to find his family. He would be forced to choose to leave them or to not get out safely. So what does Ajmal do? He cries out his brother's name, who was looking after his parents. No response. He cries it again, and he cries it again, and then he hears his brother's name echoed by another person in the crowd. Slowly, one by one, the crowd saw that Ajmal was looking for his family, and they echoed his brother's name to help him find his brother, until everyone in the crowd was crying out his name. And this is a true story. Eventually, his family heard his voice and found Ajmal. They all were allowed through, they boarded a plane, and are now safe. I end with this story for two reasons. Sometimes we can pick up the phone and there is a compassionate voice like Kirk Johnson that gives us the direction and support we need. But sometimes we pick up the phone and we hear nothing. At that moment, we can choose to reflect the silence and risk the same consequences Ajmal would have faced, a life where we are separated and alone in a dangerous world. Or we can cry out to our God, cry out to our family, cry out to the inner God who dwells within us. Ajmal could have given up, but he cried out. He offered a prayer. And while I don't know if it was the divine, the universe, or just a group of caring human beings, his voice was heard. Why should we try to open the window? Because when we do, we can allow the light of hope to shine in, a hope that can only be tapped when we try and pick up the phone. Shana Tova.